Every night, somewhere between 11 o'clock and 3 in the morning, your kidneys quietly filter almost 50 gallons of blood. Not once, not twice. Around the clock, every single day, whether you're awake to notice or fast asleep. And here's the part almost nobody tells you. What you ate in the hour before you turned off the light has a real, measurable effect on how well that filtering job goes. Most people think about their kidneys the way they think about their attic, completely, until something goes wrong up there. I'd like to change that tonight. I'm Dr. Seo. I've spent more than 15 years in internal medicine and nutritional biochemistry, which is really just a fancy way of saying I study what food actually does to the body once you swallow it, not what the package promises. And I want to tell you something before we go any further. I'm not here to sell you a supplement, a cleanse, or a course. I'm here to walk you through the actual research, in plain English, so you can make your own decisions with your eyes open. Stick with me tonight, because we're building to a fruit at the very end of this list that surprises almost everyone who hears about it. A fruit connected to something your kidneys do only while you're asleep, something most doctors don't have time to explain in a 15-minute visit. If you've ever wondered why your blood pressure reading at your morning appointment never quite matches how you feel, the answer might be sitting in your fruit bowl. Stay with me for that one. Now, let me give you the 60 seconds of biology that makes everything else in this video make sense. Your kidneys are two fist-sized organs sitting just under your ribs, and their real job isn't just cleaning blood. It's balance. Sodium, potassium, acid, fluid, blood pressure. All of it gets fine-tuned, minute by minute, by roughly 1 million tiny filtering units in each kidney called nephrons. Here's the part that matters for tonight's topic specifically. Healthy kidneys normally allow your blood pressure to drop, or dip, while you sleep. That nighttime dip is protective. It gives the blood vessels feeding your kidneys a rest. But in a huge number of people over 50, especially with even mild, undiagnosed high blood pressure or early insulin resistance, that dip doesn't happen properly. Researchers call it non-dipping, and it's been tied in population studies to faster kidney decline over time. That single fact, that your kidneys are doing their most sensitive work overnight, is why what's on your plate before bed is not a trivial detail. It's timing biology. So here's the one idea I want you to carry through this entire list, because every single fruit I mentioned tonight will connect back to it. Most kidney advice you've ever heard is about subtraction. Cut the salt, watch the potassium, skip the bacon. And that advice is often correct. But subtraction isn't the whole story. And it's not the part that actually gets people to change their evening habits, because nobody sticks with a diet that only ever tells them no. Tonight, I want to flip that. I want to show you what you can add. Specific, ordinary fruits eaten in the hour or two before bed that support the exact processes your kidneys are running overnight, keeping oxidative stress down, keeping blood pressure from spiking, and in one very specific case, helping that protective nighttime dip actually happen. Keep those three things in the back of your mind: oxidative stress, blood pressure spikes, and the nighttime dip, because you'll see at least one of them show up in every fruit on this list. And I'll be honest with you about where I come from on this. In Korean medicine, there's an old idea called yaksik dongwon. Food and medicine share the same root. It's not mysticism. It's really an early intuitive version of what nutritional biochemistry proves today, that what you eat is a form of ongoing low-dose treatment, for better or worse. But I want to be just as honest about the other side of that tradition. Korean cuisine is famous for fermented vegetables and preserved fish, and some of those dishes are wonderful for the gut, and also, frankly, loaded with sodium, which is exactly what an overworked kidney does not need before bed. So when I bring in a Korean lens tonight, it's because the science genuinely earns it, not because Korean is a stand-in for safe. Let's get into the list. Number 1 on tonight's list is the apple, and I mean the whole apple, skin on. Here's why an apple, of all things, belongs on a kidney video. It's one of the lowest potassium, lowest phosphorus common fruits available. And both of those minerals matter enormously to anyone with reduced kidney function, because struggling kidneys can't clear excess potassium and phosphorus the way healthy ones can. A medium apple carries around 195 milligrams of potassium. Compare that to a banana at roughly 420. Which is exactly why the National Kidney Foundation lists apples among its recommended fruits on a kidney-friendly eating pattern. But there's a second reason it's here tonight specifically. The skin contains quercetin, a plant compound with real antioxidant activity, studied for its role in reducing oxidative stress in blood vessel walls. Remember, that's one of our 3 mechanisms. So what should you do tonight? A sliced apple, skin on, is a genuinely reasonable evening snack, and if you want to make it feel like dessert instead of a diet, a light dusting of cinnamon does the job, without adding sodium or sugar. Number 2 is the blueberry, and here's the why is this even here moment. Blueberries are almost entirely water and fiber, and yet they carry one of the highest antioxidant densities of any commonly eaten fruit. The specific compounds are anthocyanins, the pigments that give them that deep blue-purple color, and they've been studied in human trials for their association with modestly improved blood pressure readings over weeks of regular intake. I want to be precise here. This is an association shown in controlled studies of daily servings over time, not a one-night miracle. But blood pressure control overnight is directly protective of the small vessels feeding your kidneys, so a food linked to steadier pressure earns its place on this list. A half cup of blueberries before bed is a small, real, defensible habit. And because they're low in both potassium and phosphorus relative to their size, they're one of the safer fruit choices, even for people managing early kidney concerns, which your doctor can confirm against your own labs. Number 3, and this is where I want you to lean in, because numbers 3 and 4 are the two most people get completely backwards. It's watermelon, and it comes with a genuine catch. Watermelon is roughly 92% water, which matters more than you'd think, because adequate hydration overnight helps your kidneys maintain healthy blood flow and helps flush concentrated waste products rather than letting them sit and crystallize, which is one of the mechanisms behind kidney stone formation. Watermelon also contains citrulline, an amino acid your body converts into nitric oxide, a molecule that helps blood vessels relax. Early research, some in small human trials, has looked at citrulline's role in supporting healthy blood pressure. But here's the catch nobody mentions. A full slice of watermelon can carry over 300 milligrams of potassium, and if you already have reduced kidney function, that's not a trivial number anymore. So the action isn't avoid it, it's portion. A modest cup, not the giant wedge, especially checked against your own recent potassium level if you have any diagnosed kidney concern. Number 4 is pineapple. And this is the other one people get wrong, usually in the opposite direction. They assume all tropical fruit is potassium heavy, and pineapple actually isn't. A cup of pineapple carries around 180 milligrams of potassium, similar to that apple we started with, which is why it also appears on kidney-friendly fruit lists from organizations like the NIDDK. The compound that earns pineapple its slot here is bromelain, an enzyme studied for mild anti-inflammatory activity, and chronic low-grade inflammation is one of the quiet background processes researchers now believe contributes to kidney tissue damage over years, not weeks. I want to be careful with the word here. Bromelain is a lead worth watching, studied mostly in smaller trials, not a proven kidney treatment. But as a low-potassium, genuinely pleasant evening fruit with a plausible anti-inflammatory angle, pineapple earns its place. A few chilled chunks after dinner does the job. No juice, because juicing strips the fiber and concentrates the sugar, and that matters even more once the sun goes down and your body is less insulin-sensitive overnight. This is exactly the moment I mentioned my own tradition earlier, because there's a small Korean habit worth stealing here, called hugwal, fruit eaten deliberately after a meal, in a small, unhurried portion, almost like a digestive. It's not about the fruit being Korean, it's about the portion and the pacing. A few pieces, eaten slowly, rather than a whole bowl in front of the television. That pacing alone changes how much sugar hits your bloodstream at once, which matters for blood vessel health as much as anything I've named so far. Number 5 is papaya, and here's why it's worth your attention. Papaya is one of the few fruits that naturally contains phytomelatonin, plant-based melatonin, the same hormone family your own pineal gland produces to help regulate your sleep-wake cycle. Now, I want to be very precise, because this is exactly the kind of claim that gets rounded up online into something it isn't. Eating papaya will not give you melatonin in any clinically meaningful dose the way a supplement would. What the research actually supports is smaller and more honest. Papaya is a low-potassium, easily digested fruit that pairs naturally with an earlier, lighter evening meal, and eating lighter, earlier meals is itself associated in sleep research with better sleep quality and steadier overnight blood pressure. So the real action here isn't papaya cures insomnia. It's this: a few cubes of papaya as a light evening finish, instead of something heavy, fatty, or salty 2 hours before bed, is a genuinely kidney-friendly swap. Now stay with me, because we've arrived at the fruit I promised you at the start. The one that ties directly back to that nighttime blood pressure dip I explained earlier. The one most people have never heard connected to their kidneys at all. Number 6. The fruit at the very top of tonight's list is the tart cherry, specifically tart or sour cherries, not the sweet Bing variety you'd eat by the handful at a barbecue. Here's why this one is different from everything else on the list. Tart cherries are one of the very few whole foods that naturally contain measurable amounts of actual melatonin, not the plant hormone adjacent compound in papaya, but molecules structurally similar to the hormone your own body produces to regulate sleep. Several small human trials, including research published looking at tart cherry juice concentrate, have found modest improvements in sleep duration and sleep quality in adults who drank it in the evening over 1 to 2 weeks. I want to say clearly, these are small trials, and melatonin content in whole cherries themselves is far lower than in the concentrated juice used in most studies. So whole cherries are a gentler, food-based version of the same idea, not a guaranteed dose. Here's why that connects to your kidneys specifically. Remember the nighttime dip I described at the start, the protective drop in blood pressure your kidneys depend on while you sleep. Poor, fragmented sleep is itself associated in research with blunted nocturnal blood pressure dipping, meaning the pressure stays elevated overnight instead of falling. And that pattern, sustained over years, is one of the associations researchers have found with faster kidney function decline in population studies. Tart cherries also carry anthocyanins, the same protective pigment family we saw in blueberries, adding a second independent independent mechanism on top of the sleep angle. So what should you do? A small handful of fresh or frozen tart cherries, or a modest glass of tart cherry juice with no added sugar, in the hour before bed, is a reasonable, low-potassium, well-supported evening habit. Not a cure for insomnia, and not a replacement for treating diagnosed sleep apnea or high blood pressure, but a genuinely defensible addition to your evening. I want to give you something to hold on to, because I've said a lot of mechanisms tonight, and I don't want them to blur together. Here's the line I'd want you to remember. Your kidneys don't clock out at night, and neither should your attention to what feeds them. That's really the whole video in one sentence. Let me tell you about a patient of mine. I'll call her Grace, because that's not her real name, and her story is really a composite of several people I've cared for over the years, not one identifiable person. Grace was 68, managing borderline high blood pressure and early prediabetes, the kind of numbers her doctor kept calling something to watch, not something to panic about. Her evening habit, like a lot of people's, was a bowl of ice cream in front of the news. We didn't take anything away from her all at once. That almost never works, and I've learned not to ask for it. Instead, we swapped the ice cream for a small bowl of blueberries and a few tart cherries most nights for about 6 weeks. At her next appointment, her home blood pressure log, which she'd started keeping on her own, showed her evening and overnight readings sitting a little steadier than before. Not dramatically, but consistently. What she told me stuck with me. It felt like something she was adding to her life, not another thing being taken away from her. That's the whole reframe I wanted you to walk away with tonight, in one small, real story. Now, I owe you the honest caveats, because a responsible video is one that tells you where this advice stops applying, not just where it starts. Everything I've described tonight is general guidance for adults broadly managing their kidney health. It is not personalized medical advice, and it doesn't replace your own physician or a registered dietitian who can see your actual labs. If you have diagnosed chronic kidney disease at stage 3 or beyond, or if you're on dialysis, your potassium and phosphorus limits are almost certainly tighter than what I've described tonight. And several of these fruits, watermelon and papaya especially, may need smaller portions or closer tracking than I've given here. That conversation belongs with your nephrologist, not a video. If you're on blood thinners like warfarin, it's worth knowing that most fruits on tonight's list are low in vitamin K and unlikely to interfere. But always mention any dietary change to the doctor managing your anticoagulation. And if you're managing diabetes, remember that fruit still contains real sugar. Smaller portions in the evening, when your body is naturally less insulin sensitive, matter more than the specific fruit you choose. None of this is a reason to skip your prescribed blood pressure medication, your diabetes management, or your regular kidney function labs. Nothing in tonight's list replaces any of that. It's a reason to have a slightly more informed conversation at your next appointment, ideally asking specifically for your potassium and creatinine numbers so you know where you actually stand. So let's bring this together into something you can genuinely use tonight, not just remember. If you want one simple habit to start with, build what I'd call a small evening bowl. A handful of tart cherries, a half cup of blueberries, and a few slices of apple. Skin on, eaten slowly, ideally an hour or so before you turn off the light. That's 3 of tonight's 6 items in one small ordinary bowl. No juice, no added sugar, no supplement. Just food doing what food actually does. If that's too much to start with, begin with just 2. The apple, because it's the easiest and lowest risk fruit on this entire list, and the tart cherries, because they're the one most directly tied to that overnight blood pressure story I walked you through. Quickly, to recap everything, the apple, for its low potassium and quercetin, eaten skin on. Blueberries, for anthocyanins and steadier blood pressure over time. Watermelon, for hydration and citrulline, kept to a modest portion because of its potassium. Pineapple, for bromelain and its low potassium load. Papaya as a light, easily digested evening finish, paired with an earlier dinner. And tart cherries at the top of the list, for their natural melatonin content and their connection to that protective nighttime blood pressure dip your kidneys depend on. If you start with just 2 tonight, make it the apple and the tart cherries, the easiest and the most evidence-backed of the 6. Your kidneys don't clock out at night, and neither should your attention to what feeds them. I'll leave you with that one more time, because if you remember nothing else from tonight, remember that. I'd genuinely like to know which of these surprised you most. Tell me in the comments. I read every one of them, and if you've already been eating any of these before bed without realizing why it mattered, say so, because that tells me I'm reaching the right audience with this channel. If tonight's video gave you something real, consider subscribing. This channel exists to give people over 60 honest sourced information about aging well, not fear dressed up as advice. And next week, we're going to talk about 5 everyday drinks that are quietly raising blood pressure in people who've never once been told to watch their salt. Because sometimes the danger isn't on your plate at all, it's in your glass. I'll see you then.